Bishop Loverde talked about encounter. This is an opportunity we have the remaining time with us, with one another, to encounter one another and to raise questions, observations. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 hands, so I'll go to you first.
There are many teachings that don't make it, to the level of the individual in the parishes, and there are many teachings that are not presented, to us on Sundays. I mean, it's difficult to find a way to do that because the purpose of the homily is to talk about the readings, but there are many ways that a pastor can provide opportunities for people to receive the teachings of the church. So I think it's a really good comment to make. And with respect to the documents, yes, they're old. I just finished working at the Secretariat of Cultural Diversity in the Church, where we assist the bishops to take care of different groupings, I should say, people in the Church of the United States, Native American, African American, Asia Pacific, and so on. And in our secretariat, we have put forward a proposal to come up with a new document on racism. We made that presentation last year, and it's going to come out probably next year. So there is something coming. There are a lot of, I would say that, there are a lot of hoops to jump through to make something like that happen, but it's very much needed. It's unfortunate that it wasn't already in process so that it could be addressed to us now, but there is something coming. But it's a very point well taken that those documents are old, and that a lot of the documents that are created by the bishops don't really make it to the everyday Catholic living in their everyday life, and so that would be something that would be good to change.
Just to add to that, in the programs, one of the things that the Peace and Justice Commission did was pick up on some bishop statements that are more recent on the racism question, because in the light of Ferguson, New York, whatever, people are saying, what's the church nationally saying? And the answer is, well, not so much nationally, but certainly on the local level, there are things going on. And we picked up on some of those, and we published them in the Peace and Justice website, and I think the program contains some of them. The other comment I'd make is probably the best statement that's come out of the Bishops' Conference recently is Shared Parishes, which is the document that is a base for Corinne Minogue's, there it is. That's recent, and it has a whole segment on racism. It's endorsed by the Bishops' Conference, and our diocese has established an office to educate and promote on a parish level through the whole question of shared parishes, which is dealing with racism and also multicultural issues.
And I have to say those documents were created by my secretariat where I was working.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Anthony Johnson. I'm from St. Joseph in Alexandria. And I think that the speaker best described it, Ms. Maria Hamm, she made me reflect and think about what does it mean to me. So you'll feel indulgent of it. I'm 57 years old. I'm not a little kid. I got some big kids. When I was going to college, I had a panel put together just like this. I was the head of the Black Student Union. Nice small college in Illinois, Grays Lake, Illinois. One of the panelists asked a question to the group, and it kind of pointed to me. I'm the 10th of 12 children, single parent, welfare. So I'm receiving great privilege, but I don't think I look white. So here this conversation is going on. We take a break, and my facilitator says, Anthony, why didn't you speak to that? Speak to what? Well, the person said, you kids are too young to even know anything about what's going on here and what you're saying. And lots of that is still happening today. So we need to tell our stories. My story is this. I'm getting nervous, so I had to write it down. The dominant group. The dominant group really needs to stand up for you. In the time I was in the Navy, I was in the Navy for 30 years and 6 days. That's the thing down there. While I was in the Navy, I applied for a program to go to college. And the program picked me up. It was for an educational advancement called the Enlisted Educational Advancement Program. 2 years of college. I put my paperwork in because this chief, who was a black man, came to me and said, what do you want to do, son? I said, I want to go to school. He said, here's the plan of the day. You fill that out. And I wouldn't do it because I was lazy. He He came back the next day and said, I thought I told you to fill that out. And I did it. When I got my ducks in a row and filled it out, the paperwork went in. I'll make this story short. It came back and said, you are approved to go to the program. You're going to the College of Lake County full-time student. That paperwork came into the command. They filed it and put it away. And I never was told that I'm going to school. I had to go and find it. I walked into the room, and I'll wrap this up. I looked at two people talking. Both of them are white. One is looking at the other saying, that young man hasn't proven to me that he's officer material. And I was standing right there. He turned around and looked at me like I was 6. And then he turned and walked away. I looked at the chief standing in front of me. This is the dominant group. And I asked him, was he talking about me? And he said, yes, son. And I said, well, he's not very smart. I'm not going to get commission. This is an educational advancement. He said, that's right. And you let him know about it. Every day you get your education, you let him know about it. That's our story. The dominant group stood up for me that day because he just let that guy talk to him like there was water on a duck. And I'm the recipient of him just standing up speaking truth to power. He spoke truth to power. By doing what? He didn't look back and say, he's a great sailor, he's done this, he's done that. He didn't try to prove it. He just said, I'm going to do my job. He took that paperwork back from the warrant officer. He was a chief. I was enlisted. I retired as a master chief. He was just like me. He said, I know what you're talking about, but I know what I'm going to do. And he took that paperwork and made it go through. He left the command, and I was ordered to go to school. When he left, no one told me. I had to call. I had to get the registration number, the register number, because I mailed my package in registered. And when it came in, I went in the office and they picked it up and showed it to me. I was so excited, I had to be told, check that social security number. Check it twice. And that's where I'm at today.
Thank you. Unless there's a comment by the panelists, we move on to the next question. On the left here, and then I'll get to you next.
Yeah, I'm Russell King, St. Michael's. Donald Trump had made a statement about Ferguson and Baltimore, saying that foreigners who are here illegally might be behind that. But I don't agree with that. I don't think the prime movers, there might be some of those foreigners participating. But it seems to me that there might be agents of foreign countries. There's something called agitation and propaganda agents, agitprop, and they might be working in embassies and consulates. They're trying to build a wedge between our people. And I know there's a People's World Daily of the U.S. Communist Party. They are often trying to act as agent provocateurs. And there's this concept between the blacks and law enforcement. There's this grudge. There's a grievance there, and there have been unprovoked, I believe, murders of law enforcement officers, and we're led to believe, well, maybe that's the reason, maybe there's justification. But can you discuss the possibility that foreigners are involved in some of the racial conflict that we see, so that despite your best efforts, they can ruin what you're doing?
Okay, who wants to comment on Donald Trump and this provocation?
It's not foreigners, it's known as the devil. The devil wants nothing more than to build a wall between people, and he'll use whatever means he can. So this is going on, and we have to realize that. I remember I started working for the church 3 years ago, and Deacon Al was working with me then, and lots of things go on, and you can't believe that they're happening, and you just have to realize spiritual warfare is going on. So what are we going to do? We can't fall back on these crazy theories. I'm sorry. We have to realize that evil is evil, and we have to fight it at every level.
Any other comment?
Yeah, just quickly, one of the things that folks like Donald Trump will say don't make any sense, because this is a nation of immigrants. The only Native Americans are Native Americans. Everybody else came from someplace else. And so most of the people here are descendants of people who came here illegally from Europe and from everywhere. And so, and some people came of their own volition, and other people came not of their own free will. And so that's a red herring that he's throwing out there. And that's the kind of white privilege manifestation that we have to get away from. Somehow or another, he and people who say things like that are privileged to say things like that. And so we cannot allow them to do that with impunity because, as Mary just said, the devil will take any form necessary in order to confuse the faithful. And so don't be confused by false gods. Don't be confused by false rhetoric. Follow the gospel.
Father Henry?
Yes. I'm a great advocate for immigrants, and I'm a good one because I'm a priest, and also because I don't come from immigrants. Okay, my ancestry does not include people who are immigrants. And this demonizing of people who are here in the country right now who came illegally is a great example of how we treat others. It's a great example of racism, and it's wrong. I have had lots of conversations with people about this. And one of the big pushbacks that I get is that well, they came illegally. So the real issue for a lot of people is they came illegally, and I come back to say, well, they came here illegally, but the current laws are not just. And I've tried to provide the example of the application of the same laws that exist today to the times when everybody else's ancestors came over, because at the time that everybody else's ancestors came over, there were no quotas. That's the law that they're breaking is the quota, saying only so many people can come into the country. It didn't exist. And I try to make the point that a good law is valid in all times and all places and for all people. Okay, so if it was a good law at the time that your ancestors came, that you had the freedom to come here with no restrictions, and that is, I believe, the good law, then there's something wrong with the laws that we have right now. Therefore, to make an issue of not obeying an unjust law is not really a good one. The laws themselves are not just, and we as Christians, as Catholics, have to stand up for justice, okay? And to also acknowledge that everyone has the right to seek a better life. Everyone has the right to emigrate, to migrate, and that's, the people who are now living in this country who are here illegally came here for the very same reasons that your ancestors did, the exact same reasons, looking for a better life. And to demonize these people is also, I think, ridiculous, because if you think about, the people from Mexico, let's take that example because that's the one that Donald Trump brings up. Okay, who are Mexicans? They're Catholics, they're Christians, they're hardworking, they have great families, they have great values, they contribute so much to our country, they're not taking anything away. And our country would not work if they weren't here. Our economy would not work. There's so many things that would not work. So it's not really proper for us to say these people don't have a right to be here, that they're criminals, that they're doing all these things that are taking away from the good of our country. It's actually not true. It's not true. But they have a right to be here. We should do something to let them have the full rights of everybody else who lives here, and to say that they don't deserve it because they broke the law is wrong, because the law itself is wrong.
There's a hand up there in the congregation. I think it's Andrea Brown Phillips, and she is the director of Catholic Charities USA, and a new office called Inclusion. I think we should have this in every parish. But before she makes her comment, I wanted to let you know that at Ellis Island, when the Irish were coming in, one of the requirements was that they would have to pass a health test, but also have a sovereign. So, if they pass, what's a sovereign? It's about a pound, golden sovereign. It was like, well, how many shillings in a pound? 20 shillings. Probably worth about $5. They needed to have a sovereign. So what they would do, they would go through the test, and then they would go back and pass the sovereign back to the next person in line. It was clever, but they were, of course, illegals. I'd like Andrea Brown Phillips to shed some light on this discussion.
Thank you, Brother Derek. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, I just want to share a few tidbits about things I've been gleaning from the feedback from the audience, and then share a little bit of a personal story as well. So, in terms of what's coming up, in terms of publications and more recent issues, there's a piece from Catholic Charities called Racism and Poverty.
Can everybody hear her? Andrea, could you come here and use the microphone?
Here's one.
Yeah.
Yeah. This.
Can you go get that
Here we go.
microphone
This
and go
was-
give it to the speaker so she doesn't plug it there. There you go. Oh, Phyllis got it. I'm sorry. It's okay.
Thank you, Father.
1 second.
This is much better. So there's a report from Catholic Charities USA that we published in 2008, just after Hurricane Katrina, called Racism and Poverty. We've actually just launched it as my maiden voyage for CCUSA. We're going to be updating it with engaging different members within the network, as well as working very closely with the USCCB on this release. Part of why it's important is because through the Catholic Charities Network, we're really the intersection of our spirit in action. Our goal towards, or work towards rather, alleviating poverty is really what drives, and we really see it on a first-hand level, the disparities that occur along racial guidelines or racial lines, especially when it comes across things like environmental justice, access to education, all the other variables and conduits that affect access to equitable rights within our country. In terms of the personal perspective, you can hear my very New England accent. Not quite. I'm actually from the Caribbean. So I am an immigrant. I am black, in case anyone didn't notice. I am Rasta. But I'm also a mother. I'm also a woman. So in terms of what you call, I would say, those of privilege, you would find that in terms of my personal narrative, about our dominant narrative for those of us who are involved in social ministry, my personal narrative has been influenced and affected by many of the things that are directed towards my personal individual journey. The other thing I'd like to share on that is the fact that as we are having these conversations here as a faith-based community, we are also part of a national dialogue because we are seeing so many trends and changes. And I just wanted to share a few figures because I love data. Everyone loves data. And it is a report from the Brookings Institute, the Center for American Progress, and the American Enterprise Institute, talking about states where the minority will be the majority. So we're in 2015, and right now we're looking at New Mexico, Texas, and California as states where the minority is now the majority. By 2025, we're going to add to that Nevada, Maryland, Arizona, and Georgia. By 2040, we're adding to that Florida, New Jersey, Alabama, New York, and Louisiana. And by 2044, all states in this country, the minority will be the majority. I hear many people talking about it's time to change the conversation. Well, guess what? There's a part where ideas and conversation have to turn into operationalizing. Those ideas have to take action. And there has to be a massive shift in consciousness. And how do we shift that consciousness and enact it in a responsible, structured, and effective manner? And that's part of what we're going to be focusing on. I thank the panelists for their contributions and look forward to working with you all. Thank you, Father Jay.
Okay, that microphone worked really well. Unless one of the panelists wants to make a comment, that was more of a statement and an offer of help. I see Eric, we can pick up the person closest to the aisle there.
Right.
Oh, no, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Another Deacon Al Anderson.
Hi, I'm, as Father said, Deacon Al Anderson. I'm from St. Joseph in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm also the chairman for the Black Catholic Ministries of the Diocese of Arlington. I've been sitting here listening to all of the discussions that we've had, and there's so many things come to mind. I am 70 years old, so I have been privileged and had the unfortunate circumstance of being faced with many of the things that we've talked about. I started high school in Norfolk, Virginia in 1963 at the beginning of integration. And several of the schools that used to play us in football dropped us from their schedule because I was on the team, didn't want to play us anymore. My parish, St. Joseph in Norfolk, was closed in 1962, and we were all sent to St. Mary's, which was the white parish. I went to a black parish, Josephite parish. We were all sent to a white parish down the street, St. Mary's, and now that's predominantly African American because of white flight. So there have been a lot of things that have gone on that I do bring to the table, but the thing is, what do we do about it? The question is, how do we combat prejudice and racism? I think we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zones, first of all. We have to be willing to listen to each other, to be a part of each other, to embrace each other. There are so many things that have happened. As chairman of the Black Catholic Ministries, we are about sharing the gifts of the Black Catholic community with the Diocese of Washington. You would think that's a no-brainer. Every culture has gifts to share. Every culture has something different, a different gift to bring to the table. We sent out letters, Corinne Minogue sent out letters to 65 parishes in the Arlington Diocese to ask them to appoint one black person from their parish to be liaison with the Black Catholic Ministries. We have several parishes that already have several members of their parishes who work with Black Catholic Ministries. And the idea is just so that we can, to facilitate sharing the gifts that our cultural community brings. Of those 65 letters, we got 3 responses so far. But we are going to keep it up. We are going to persevere because we have so many gifts, such a rich diversity to bring. I'm also, as a deacon, I bring a unique gift to the table. In the Arlington Diocese, I'm the first and still the only African-American permanent deacon. When there was only one diocese, there was another down in the Richmond Diocese when this was all one diocese, on whose shoulders I stand. But in the Arlington Diocese itself, there's only me as a permanent deacon. By God's grace and mercy, we've got 2 others in the pipeline now, and my brother Anthony Johnson has applied, so I ask that you keep him in your prayer. But again, we have to, my sisters and brothers, be willing to get out of our comfort zone, face the reality of racism that exists, because it does exist, and it does no good at all to point to others. People in power like to say, well, it's not me doing that. During the civil rights struggle, and which I was there for, folks like to say, well, this is all caused by outside agitators. That brings to the point what you mentioned about foreigners coming in and starting this. This is not a foreign problem, this is an American problem. There was no more a problem of outside agitators in Mississippi in the 60s than there was a problem of international foreigners coming in stirring up the pot today. It's a lie. And we have to be open and honest enough to realize that, to face it, and to deal with it in an aspect of love. What has helped me to survive and to endure the things that I've endured during these past 70 years growing up in the South, you have to make a decision. Are you going to be bitter? Are you going to just be angry? Or are you going to embrace it in the spirit of love? I chose love.
Amen, brother.
That's the only way we're going to do this. We have to be willing to put all of that stuff aside and embrace each other. Open our eyes to the reality. Racism does exist, but it can be conquered. and by God's grace and mercy, it will be conquered. Thank you.
Eric, you go ahead. Use your own discretion here. There's another hand over here.
There's one hand up there as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was thinking when I was listening to Father Sands, I was thinking about how, you know, the whole don't talk rule and white privilege. And from my own experience growing up in white privilege with a father who, my dear departed father, was a bigot. But I deliberately said, I'm not going to be that way, I'm not going to be that way. But how much, and I ask this of all of you, how much do we consider the unconscious and the subconscious stuff that we're not even aware of? And I know that I find things pop up and it shocks me. And I go, where did that come from? And you know, so if we who are aware think of those things, how do we help our brothers and sisters who are just sort of sliding through and they're like, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not, you know, but there may be some things down there. How do we help them find what's below, what's underneath?
Who wants to answer that one?
Yeah, the simple answer is that we do it one-on-one. That we do it with the person who's right next to us on the parish level. And as Father Sands said, this building intercultural competency for ministers is not just for the guys in the college. It's for people who work in the vineyard of the Lord, whether you're lay or ordained or religious. And we who are in ministry, whether you're lay or ordained, must stop thinking about people as other. That's where our come from has to be, that we're all in the same boat here. We all share our humanity. We're all going to the same place. At some point, we're gonna stand before the Almighty and explain what we did with all the gifts that He gave us. You know, not all our great successes and everything, but did we give our 100%? And our 100% is to love one another the way Christ loved us. Okay, and if we're doing that, then we're doing God's will. The other thing is to educate those who are next to us, finding out what it is they don't know, and if we know it, pass it on to them. And one of the things I did in the Office of Black Catholics when I was there is to try to instill a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of being a part of this mission which we call the gospel. And one of the things, I'll just toot my own horn here, this booklet was put out a couple of years ago on looking at how Black Catholics were in history of the church from day one, from Simon Cyrene all the way up to the present day. And yeah, he was not a white guy. If you look on the map, Cyrene is in North Africa somewhere, so he was a brown person. Okay. And also championing the contributions that people of color have always made to the church, that this is not a European church. Remember, it started in Palestine, which is not in Europe. And there are different ways to express our Catholicism, all very valid. In my other life, I was a cameraman for ABC News, and I traveled all over the world. I've been in every continent except Antarctica and Greenland. And I've been at Mass in at least 23 different languages around the world, and it's always the Catholic Church. If I didn't understand one word that was said there, I understood where I was, and the Eucharist was present there. And so there are many ways that we can do it. And my stump speech when I go around talking about Catholicism and the diversity that it is, the Catholic Church is the body of Christ. It has many parts. It's like a patchwork quilt, which is a beautiful creation all in itself. But all of the individual pieces maintain their identity. Amen. And what keeps us together, stitches us together, is our common faith. And so if we look at it that way, then no one is ever other. They always belong to this greater whole, which we call the church. And it's the differences in our way of doing music, our demonstrative attitudes during the sacred liturgy. All of that stuff is part of who we are, and we should revel in our diversity. Diversity is not something to be feared, it is something to be embraced. Because God spent 6 whole days making a very diverse world for us to live in. So if he took all that trouble to do it, who are we to try to undo it?
Amen, brother.
I just wanted to address your question about responding subconsciously or even unconsciously, not realizing that I'm acting out of things that I'm not even aware of, that are not at the forefront of my mind. We do that all the time. So I wanted to just use the analogy of growing in our relationship with the Lord, growing in the Christian faith, to growing in our awareness of the problem of racism and how I'm a part of it, and what can I do to make things better. Because in living the Christian life, we are presented with the faith by our parents, by the church, our participation in the life of the church, and our making decisions to grow in the Christian faith. We make decisions to read scripture, to participate in the life of church, participate in the sacraments, to do spiritual reading, to spend time with other Christians, to allow the media that we are engaging with to be media that is Christian, that's going to feed us spiritually. And it's a journey that takes our entire life, and we grow into it. And as we grow into it, we become aware of all the different things that have influenced us that are contrary to what it is that we're striving for. So in this case, with the whole issue of racism, I think it's a good analogy. I usually do it the other way around when I talk to people. People are saying, well, how do I grow in the faith? How do I grow in a relationship with Jesus Christ? And I invite them to use an analogy from their own life experience and apply the principles and the experience to the Christian life, to the relationship with our Lord. And in this case, we can apply it to the whole issue of racism, because it's just such an unknown thing for us. We haven't thought about it. We haven't engaged with this whole issue with the matter. So to think about, how do I become a better musician, or how do I become a better athlete, or how do I become better at my career? What are the things that I do? What are the kind of decisions that I make? What are the choices that I make? What are the things that I eliminate from my mind and from my decision making in order to pursue the goal? And I think for us who are here right now, because we are gathered here together as members of the church, as members of this Diocese of Arlington, the local church, the thing that our Lord wants us to be most important to us is our relationship with Him and our growing in the life He invites us to share. So to think about, how do I do that? What is my journey of faith all about? And how is the Lord guiding me and leading me? How am I responding? Where have I had success? Where do I still need to improve? And then we can apply those same kinds of thoughts and principles and choices and decision making to engaging with this whole matter of racism.
We'll allow one more question. Up top of the right here. Yeah, why do you stand?
Could I just very briefly?
Okay. Oh, sorry. You got the mic.
Very briefly. Just following up on Maria Hamm's invitation that we read and study for ourselves. My name's Marty Swain, and I'm a diversity tutor in the Arlington Public Schools. And as a white person learning about white privilege, one of the most specific sources of information for me in my reading is there's a recent book actually that puts a lot of this together. It's called When Affirmative Action Was White. And it's very specific about the ways in which white privilege has developed in modern times. About FHA lending, which only went to white people, GI Bill benefits, which only went to white men, which really created white suburbs in the United States, the housing stuff. And the author is Ira Katzelson. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Can I just say one thing back? One great resource that I used is Immigration in the Next America by Archbishop Gomez. This is a very studied, I think very well done synopsis, and he gives also a big bibliography in the back. And again, to the question of what we have in our minds that comes out, and how to reach people when they say things, we've got to be able to tell stories. I think storytelling and testimony, it's what Christ used, it's what works. People have to identify with the characters.
Amen. Last question. Sands has to go. And,
Good afternoon. Jim Brown, the St. Jude Parish, the southernmost parish in the Arlington Diocese.
Yeah.
Father Hudgens doing a good job. A little plug for him. What is it? Yesterday, in terms of the going to Mass and thinking about loving others with the love of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And what comes to mind for me is how what Mary had mentioned and what the deacon had mentioned. So much has happened because not just from the pulpit, the ambo, as far as priests speaking, but all of us being complicit in the perpetuation of a form of racism and prejudice. And one thing that comes to mind prior to this current thing with all of the stuff about immigrants is, as the deacon pointed out, the disrespect to the president, regardless as to what color. When that is allowed, that is said, that's on bumper stickers in the Catholic parking lots. And it does not get addressed in terms of love and respect. That basically says we're complicit. When we hear the term illegal alien, that term alien infuriates me because I grew up always thinking about illegal aliens somewhere out there. So when I hear the term illegal aliens, and everybody sits and says, well, there are some illegal aliens in this country. That is very insulting. But how many of any of us, basically in love, said, I think the correct term might be illegal immigrant, as opposed, or undocumented person, or whatever, but illegal alien. That says they are definitely the other, and they don't belong here. Just briefly, being one of these 70 types, growing up initially was at Dale City.
Yeah.
We used to meet in the Godwin School back before Holy Family.
Good work.
And seeing, the way your parish is done, we've been down there on a number of occasions. But the bottom line is, when we confront people with love, it can change things.
Amen.
As opposed to judging the other person, confronting with love. And lastly, attending a parish out in Illinois, with my mom, who just celebrated her 94th birthday. God bless her. But Holy Family in Palatine. But what stuck in my mind was, they have a basic saying. In the closing prayer, the priest says, go in peace. And the congregation responds, the Mass never ends.
Wow.
And I thought that was so powerful because when you think about it, the Mass never ends. If we are going about and preaching and basically being good examples of the Christ who lives within us. Thank you.
What a beautiful closing. Thank you. You mentioned Dale City. I'd like to invite you all to Dale City on the 27th of September for the 12:30 Spanish Mass, followed by a Human Rights Town Hall meeting. I'm sharing with you as a possible model for other parishes. I went to a Human Rights Town Hall meeting in Prince William County, organized by the Human Rights Commission of the county, and there was a group probably about this size, and they were reflecting on is Prince William County different than Fairfax County, or Ferguson, or wherever, or Baltimore, and how much better we were, of course. And we had all of the public officials, a variety of levels, police department, you name it. And it was interesting to me that the Human Rights Commission organized this. It's a wonderful opportunity for the whole community to respond, as they did. But it was entirely Europeans and African Americans, and no Latinos, as if people who spoke Spanish had no human rights problems in Prince William County. So I kind of, since I'm not used to being quiet and silent, I spoke up and said, you know, there's somebody not here that needs to be here for this human rights discussion. So the Human Rights Commission called me a couple of weeks ago, saying we are following up on your question, and we'd like to go to your parish and address the Latino community. And about 1,000 of them show up on 12:30 on a Sunday, and so afterwards we're going to have a town hall meeting. We'll see how it works. Hopefully it will be in Spanish, otherwise people won't understand what's going on. And it's kind of the invisible human rights problem. And Latinos, of course, didn't show up, and they're not showing up here much today because it's all in English. And there's this wall of language barrier that we need to figure out somehow to get around. But come and be a part of at least that discussion and see how it goes. I have no idea how it will go. But it's needed, because while we are addressing all of the human rights issues, a huge human rights question right now in the United States is the treatment particularly of unaccompanied minors, who are put in hielerias, ice boxes in Arizona, whatever, and when they're put in these ice boxes, these young women ask, why are you doing this? They'll say, por castigo, for punishment. It's all in the name of our identity, etc. But come be a part of that discussion, but figure out what can be done in all of our parishes to continue this kind of discussion. It's necessary. The Office of Multicultural Ministries has this as their goal, to work on shared parishes, particularly where we work this out, rubbing elbows with one another. And Corinne Minogue is a very dedicated leader who's going to help any parish set up a forum on racism, multicultural issues, and so forth, shared parishes. You want to say the last word?
Well, really quickly, just in case, I don't want to keep anybody, but just in case anybody would, if you signed up with Bob or Celeste when you first came in and are on our email list, I do sit on the Peace and Justice Commission, and we do blasts, not too terribly often, but we will have Father Henry Sands slideshows there. We'll put the link to this video that we've been recording today, and the audio as well from everything that has occurred here today. So if you sign up for that, in a couple of weeks you'll get today's presentation. If you'd like to share that with your parish, with your ministry, with whoever you work with. I have been, I would just like to say, it's been my true honor to know Father Sands and Deacon Turner for maybe close to a decade, it might be, yeah. And the three of us, in working together on the building intercultural competency for ministers. And I share with them the struggles and the joys. And I am a presenter of all of this, of what you heard here today. And so if in your parish you would like the topic of racism or intercultural communication or any one of the modules that are in the book that you can find on the USCCBU website, just email our office, and we're on the Arlington Diocese website, just to reference that.
Liliana Taylor, who's with the Unity in the Community, shouted out, what about the city on the 20th at Holy Family, the Unity in the Community, which is a coming together of inter-religious groups in Prince William County. It's the most diverse gathering of clergy from the very Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Native American, you name it. They're getting together on the 20th at 3 o'clock at Holy Family, Dale City. The focus there is more on stereotyping within the context of interreligious issues. And well, how can we develop understandings toward peace in the diversity of our religious traditions? I just want to thank our panelists and thank all of you for being a part of this. And when you talk about the clergy, it's not just priests. We have deacons here all over the place, and let's join with the clergy, all of us, and do what we can to promote peace, justice, and some harmony.